Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Hello? 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 Hello?
Who are you talking to?
I don't know. The phone keeps ringing and ringing, but when I pick it up, there's either no one there or the voice is so faint and far away I can hardly hear it.
Well, it could be from our producer, Tina.
Well, I don't know. He says his name is Indrid Cold and that he has a message from John Keel. Well, I don't know. Maybe the ringing is in my head.
Oh, that could be.
That could be. Hey, so Tim, how's it going out in that pleasant little Midwestern town of Jasper, Indiana?
Oh, it's as always. It's have the bucolic surroundings and no ghostly messages tonight though. So far,
No,
maybe
I don't know. Maybe we'll get a few spirits to come through. Oh, we've been real busy here the last a couple of days. We're finishing up on our next book. Even though I'm semi-retired and down to putting out 3 titles a month, we're still very active. Sean and I and Bill Kern, our master of graphics, have been on the internet all day, laying down the type, and now he's going to start putting in the photos. And I hesitate to give the title away because it's such a good title. I do think it's called "Screwed by the Aliens." Now, it has a double meaning, but our program isn't about alien sex this week, so I don't want to go into it in great detail, but it should be available on Amazon, hopefully, because Amazon is merging with Kindle, or actually Create Space, which is the printing arm of Amazon, is merging with Kindle. And if you think Skype is giving you problems, this is going to be even worse, Tim, because there's 300 books of ours. We got to march over from Create Space to Kindle. I don't know how, and then all the templates and all the ways of doing covers, which you also work on, are going to be different. So we're gonna probably have to spend days trying to figure this out. And I leave it to you guys because my technology expertise are very, very, very limited. But aren't you excited about the book?
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. I know that I had a wonderful time doing the research on the chapters that I contributed. So I'll really be interested to see what everyone else has brought forth. We have the sextraterrestrials are here and they want to mate with you. That's the whole theme of the book, and it's got some wild stuff in there. But this is not science fiction, Tim. This is down to earth. Well, I don't know, down to earth. Well, the aliens come down to earth here, and they're taking women and doing all kinds of nasty things. It's worse than being in the Catholic Church, I suspect. I don't know. No, but
all right. Enough with this fiddle faddle and alien renegade aliens from Uranus, and let's get on. Oh, let's get on with the topic of discourse for the evening.
Topics of discourse. Well, I guess tonight, and actually, you could take this in several different ways, kind of like what we were talking about. But tonight, we're talking about reaching out and touching someone from the beyond.
Well, it's happening.
That's right. That's right. Well, we have two excellent guests now. William J. Hall, or Bill Hall, has been on our show before, and also with Bill tonight is Jiminy 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 Cricket. There
Jiminy
you go, boy.
Cricket.
I didn't
Jiminy
even
Cricket is here.
I didn't even get a chance, Jimmy, to make it to your last name before I screwed it up. Well, we'll just say Jiminy Petsanito, or Mr. Haunted, as he likes to be called. But now, Bill, as I said, who's been on the show before, is the author of the paranormal bestseller, The World's Most Haunted House, The True Story of the Bridgeport Poltergeist on Lindley Street, and The Haunted House Diaries. Now, Bill is professionally equipped to recognize trickery after more than 25 years as a performing magician, and he knows how to create and recognize illusions. He's also an experienced researcher of the unexplained, from folklore and urban legend to fortune-telling, the pyramids, and other mysterious tales. Bill has been interviewed around the world, and his syndicated column, Magic of the Unknown, ran for 6 years in multiple newspapers. And Bill has 2 sons and resides somewhere in the mysterious state of Connecticut. Now, Jimmy, a.k.a. Mr. Haunted, began investigating with Ed and Lorraine Warren and has gone on to explore the unknown for over 30 years. He's appeared on numerous television shows such as Sightings, Unsolved Mysteries, Primetime Live, Hostage to the Devil, which was a documentary, and his cases have been featured on shows such as Canada's Scariest Night of My Life and others. Now, Jimmy is also the host of the popular radio program, The Haunted Chronicles, and he is also often called Mr. Haunted, and Jimmy resides with his 2 beautiful daughters, also in the mysterious land of Connecticut. So, Jimmy, Bill, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Well, you know, what is so mysterious about Connecticut, Bill?
Can
you
the fact
tell
that
us what's so...
Jimmy and I are here is probably the main reason.
What? Okay. Well, when do you're primarily an investigator of the. Well, I don't know. Poltergeist, was it Poltergeist kind of got you into this, right?
Well, that was Lindley Street got me deep, but no, I think magic probably got me into it. I mean, that's usually the way it goes.
That's unusual, because most people who perform magic professionally are dead set against any of this. They think that we're scamming the public.
You know, it's interesting when Lindley Street, when World's Most Haunted House came out. You know, I wasn't super concerned because, you know, I was confident in what I did in the research there and the interviews and whatnot. But I was wondering how my magic friends would, because I know them all around here. You know, I mean, everybody knows everybody. It's just like in the paranormal, you know, the smaller groups, you know, niches. And I wondered how you know, people would respond. But I was quite surprised that you know, magician friends read and said, "Oh, that's really weird," you know. So I think that's the perception, and I think it's very true when it comes to things like spoon bending. You know, things that magicians could easily replicate.
I've seen spoon bending. I have seen Uri Geller do more than bend spoons. Now, you know what the problem is here is that a magician can say, "Well, I can duplicate that." And yes, it's true. You can duplicate it, but it doesn't mean that the original has to necessarily be a fake. And here's something that most people don't realize. I actually shared office space with the amazing Randy. In fact, he wanted me years ago to, I don't know, manage him or book him or do whatever it was he was trying to do. He's, I hate to say this, but he wasn't the world's greatest, more of a mentalist, I would say. I mean, I saw him levitate a woman one time, or a girl one time, and the levitation equipment was shaking back and forth, and you could see the curtain in back of him moving, because that's how it was kind of set up, you know. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about the amazing Randy, but
No,
yeah.
He's a talented magician, but you know the thing, and I definitely preferred Houdini's approach, because he was very he really wanted to find stuff. You know, he wasn't trying to just disprove stuff. He was looking himself. But you know, Uri Geller just did a big expose tape because he's trying to make amends to the magic community. So, I mean, he's admitted
right?
Oh yeah,
is that right? Is he trying to make a living? Well, he made money on this, you know.
No. I said I mean make amends. He's
yes.
You know, now he's older and stuff, so he put out a three DVD set where he explains you know, how he bent spoons, which everybody knows. He wasn't a very good spoon bender, by the way, but yeah, magicians have done much better. But when somebody believes, it's a little bit easier to bend a spoon. You know what I mean? Because they're not even watching you. But no, he did a whole expose. So, and there's mixed feelings. Some magicians never hated him, and they said, hey, he was able to perform, and that's fine. And other people like Randy hated him because you know, good scientists spent their money and time on somebody who was, you know, tricking them. So, you know,
now is he saying
a real tough balance, you know.
Is he saying everything he did was a fake?
Oh yeah. Oh well, yes. I mean, and it was. I mean, it was obvious to magicians because you know, I can play a video and show you exactly when he bends the key. I mean, he's not very good at it.
Listen. On the other hand, I saw him one time. I was in somebody's apartment, and it was Herb Bailey, who was the science editor of some magazine, and he took Herb's key, and he told me to put my apartment key, on the desk across the room. He never even touched it, right? And he stroked Herb's key, and the key bent maybe 2/3 of the way. And then finally, after he was doing that, and he gave Herb's key back, he told me to go over and pick up my key and look at it. And my key was bent about 20% of the way. He never touched it.
And of course, that's what everybody says to a good magician who just did a trick. They say the same thing. I mean, you know, I've bent nails before and spoons and keys, and I mean, that wasn't my specialty. But of course, when it became popular, we all learned it. But Banachek, he was a much better bender than Geller, although he was admittedly fake. But he was studied by scientists for 4 years and passed every test. But he went to a radio station where Geller was just at and couldn't bend the spoons, and he bent them. And when the guys were saying, you know, are you real? He says, well, no, I'm not real. He said, but I can tell you this: those are heavy spoons. I know why Geller couldn't bend them. They were tough. He walked out.
Well, you know, the best case.
You know, but that doesn't. I'm not putting down people who believed in him. I think that is the challenge in the paranormal. Luckily, when you get the poltergeist, things like that, you kind of get out of that realm. You don't see the fakery as much as you see misinterpretation of something. You know what I mean?
Well, okay. One last item about the spoon or the utensil bending. I was at the Fortean Society convention in Washington, D.C. with John Keel many years ago. The organization was run by a lady by the name of Phyllis. Now, they decided during the afternoon lunch that they were going to have people in the audience, or they were attending the lunch, let's say about 70 people or something like that, try to bend spoons or some other utensil. Well, let me tell you, there were 2 or 3 people in the there at that lunch who bent. Now, I saw one item that was a fork, and this thing was twisted. It wasn't bent. It was twisted like a pretzel. And this person was surprised. is as anyone else to see their fork bent like a pretzel. So you can't tell me that.
That's why I love magic. That's why I love the art of magic, because it brings that kind of wonder into people's eyes.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is what you are describing has been done for centuries. It's not a new trick. It hasn't been necessarily done with the spoons, but these are not new tricks. This is not a new art. I mean, magic was, of course, obviously, very old, but it was the trade of poachers and thieves and priests and the right-hand man of the kings. I mean, that's magic has a kind of a dark past in that regards. But I'm not here to put down Giller. I don't know. I have mixed feelings. If I could have made the money he did, maybe I should have did that too. Some magicians like him because they say he pulled it off. Others don't because they say he really shouldn't have lied. Because there's good people like you that that'll see something like that and believe it. Because how could someone who's not trained in the art of magic, even if somebody is a beginner magician, could be fooled, as Houdini pointed out.
I could certainly. I mean, first of all, I kind of find real magic, boring. To be honest with you, I mean, when it comes on TV, I turn it off. It's just not something that appeals.
It's not good art for TV. It's not really a good TV art either. It's hard, especially since Star Wars.
But we're here not to talk about Uri Geller. We're here to talk about the dead, or supposedly the dead, who are able to communicate with us through the various devices like the telephone and. I know there have been some cases now where they have been communicating through a computer and even the TV, right? I mean, so there is weird, unexplained phenomena going on all around us, despite somebody maybe being able to or not being able to spend spoons with their mind. So tell us about how did you get intrigued by conversations with the dead, and be a little bit more specific. What exactly? Well, you have a new book out. It's called Phantom Messages, right? And tell us a little bit about what's in the book. I mean, what's your concept here?
Jimmy, you want to take that one, or you want me, or why don't you take that one?
Oh, nice. You answer all the nice questions about your magic friends. All right.
Oh, good.
Anyways, it's
we were ready to proceed over here. I know. Sorry, good.
Oh well, how we got our the book is about chilling phone calls, letters, emails, and texts from unknown realms, and we kind of got the idea, Bill, because I called Bill up because he already previously wrote a book, and I wanted to write something about local urban legends, and we got to talking and said let's do something together. And what was the idea, Bill? Like, you see these posts. My grandmother called me texted me this morning, but she's been dead for 10 years. So we wanted to see if there was enough information to do a whole book on that. And we have I think over 60 stories.
Yeah, we wanted it to be broader. So of course we all loved phone calls from the dead, and Jimmy and I grew up with that. And you guys, I'm sure have heard of it, if not read it, and own it on your shelf. It's a classic. And so from there we said, well, what if we didn't just look at phone calls? Because a lot has happened, and of course, and what if we just didn't look at phone calls from quote unquote the dead? What if we just looked at any unexplainable direct contact
and unexpected?
Unexpected. We didn't want somebody who was searching for it with an EVP and said, yes, I found it. Not that we knocked that or anything. It's just that we thought it would be cool if we kind of focused on, direct contact that was unexplainable, but also was unexpected. They weren't looking for it. They weren't trying to find it. It was just something that happened. So hopefully that kind of gives the basis. We didn't invent the term phantom messages, but it was one that was not used commonly. And we certainly thought it fit a broader term that encompassed those unexplainable messages that had to do with whether it was a time slip or a family member or, part of the extraterrestrial phenomenon.
Why don't you give us an example of
Okay.
what are the content? Yeah,
I'll give you one.
All right.
Okay. This particular woman, she had a father who died in winter of 2014, and about a year later, she was looking around in her attic for Christmas decorations, and she saw some of her father's old items in the attic, and she found one of the old. He had an old ham radio, and her father was like an amateur radio operator, and he used to communicate with people. She remembers when she was a kid. After she saw it, she goes, "Wow, my dad used to use this all the time." So she plugged it in, and nothing happened, and then remembered that it has to warm up a bit. And after it lit up and the lights started glowing on the radio, she didn't hear anything at all. But then she started to hear some static about 20 minutes later. And she went over to the radio to see what's going on, and she heard her dad's voice call her by her childhood nickname. That it's the only person that ever called her that, and she even called her husband up there to see if it would happen again, so he could hear it too. And her husband both witnessed her dad saying "Hi, pumpkin." And she asked if you were okay, and it said, "Are you with mom?" And it said yes, and that was the last communication she had with him. But that's one example right there. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to have to go to our bottom of the hour break, first one of the evening. So when we come back, we will continue our conversation about strange messages from the unknown to our electronic devices on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. Tonight, we're talking with Bill Hall and Mr. Haunted about their book, Phantom Messages. And Tim, didn't you say that you had a story that you wanted to tell?
Well, yes. Now, I was a frequent guest on the Long John Neville show. Now, he was the original pioneer of the all-night paranormal show, long before there was Art Bell and George Noory, and they realized that. In fact, when WOR here in New York picked up Coast to Coast, I hooked them up with Long John's former producer, Paris Lamont, and they did a 10-minute interview. With Paris, because Long John did start this format way back in the 1950s. Well, I was just kind of getting going in the world of the UFOs and the strange and all that, and Long John Neville had moved from WOR. In fact, Randy took over his show. We talk about the amazing Randy on WOR, and John moved over to NBC, where he was getting a lot more money. I think they paid him $100,000, which in those days was a phenomenal amount for a radio type personality. In fact, probably is today. Yeah, even. But outside of a few really top notch syndicated hosts. But John, of course, kind of started out with the all the UFO contactees. He had on George Adamski, he had George Van Tassel, Dan Fry. They sat in the studio from midnight till 5:30 in the morning, 6 nights a week, and then I think maybe he replayed a show on Sunday night, but not always. Talking about their encounters with extraterrestrials, fair-haired Venusian types mainly. Anyway, John got ill and succumbed to cancer. And he was remarkable in that regard because he would come into the studio in his wheelchair and he'd be all slumped over, and the minute that they turned on the microphone, he would go at it like there was nothing wrong. Kind of an inspiration to me, actually, to be honest with you. Anyway, after John passed away, his wife, Candy Jones, who was a very famous model during that era, would have me on quite frequently, usually on a Sunday night, because I figured she couldn't get a whole heck of a lot of people who wanted to come out to be on the show. So we had a little, friendship going, and we didn't just talk about UFOs. We, knocked it around Loch Ness monster and so forth and so on. Anyway, one night when they had their famous half-hour pastrami break, we got free sandwiches in those days, Tina. The station got the free sandwiches and all from Sarge's Deli. We would just chat nonchalantly, and she told me a story, and she said, "I'm going to tell you this, but please don't repeat it." After John had passed away, she was going through boxes of reel-to-reel. I think, Tim, were they not 10 or 12-inch reel-to-reel tapes in those days that they
Yes.
used in the studio? Yeah, big,
Big
old,
ones,
heavy, big, heavy suckers, but good quality. I mean, nothing like today. And she said she was, because she was marking. Nothing had been cataloged, and most of the stuff didn't have any, title to it. So she didn't know what show it was, for the nights that they wanted to replay. So she's sitting there and listening to it in the headsets, And all of a sudden, in the middle of one program, she hears her mother's voice saying, not Candy, whatever Candy's nickname was, that she said only her mother knew. And it lasted for, just a few seconds, repeated, let's say Candy, Candy, Candy. And she said it definitely was her mother, but the sound of her mother's voice, but there was no possible way that she could figure out that her mother's voice should or could have been on that tape, because her mother had no access to recording equipment, and she had never been in the NBC studio. So how did her voice get on that tape? Bill, maybe you can tell me.
I just like to interject. Good thing it didn't say Candy Man 3 times. That's all.
Yes, that's right. Candy Jones had this thing. Yeah. Candy had this thing where she claimed she was a mind control victim. If you know the story, in fact, there's a whole book out there. She was kind of the female version of the Manchurian Candidate. But anyway, how did the voice get on the tape? Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect example of phantom message. And that's what we tried to collect. We tried to collect cases that had some unique elements, and of course, ones that had 2 or more were even more intriguing. And in other words, it's one thing if you hear a song through a speaker. Could that be an old, where they could act that way? But then what is the song? Once everything starts fitting together, then you're like, wow, this is really different, because it's not just this, it's this. And sometimes it's in conjunction with a larger haunting, and sometimes it's not. And that's the kind of thing that we track in the book, to kind of look at all of what we see. Because, of course, we do see phantom messages within a regular poltergeist or, entity kind of case. We see them in the UFO lore, but we wanted to really dig into the different types there were, and they're all fascinating. But I don't know about Jimmy, but to me, the ones that, and they all may be this, I don't know, but the ones that seem to be like time slips, those to me are and like I said, who knows, maybe they all are, maybe, but there are some that distinctly appear like that. And those to me were the most fascinating ones. Like the lady her boyfriend picks up the phone and hears what his unmistakably, he knows, he just knows. And that's the other thing in these cases, especially the time slip ones. It's kind of like I guess not that unusual in the paranormal, where you kind of like, you instantly know that this is different. But anyhow, so he's listening to this, and it's on a respirator and everything, but he knows it's him, and he knows he's hearing himself die. And
wow.
And then he, of course, he ends up dying, and the girlfriend heard it too. But it's like, when people hear these things, it's like they instantly get that, that not only that feeling, but that knowledge of, oh my God, I'm just not hearing a respirator. This is me. This is me. I'm hearing on the phone. And so phantom messages are more than just phone calls from the quote unquote dead, or whoever they are, or wherever they are, but they're also the living calling the living without knowing, and insisting they didn't. It's the time slips, it's the letters, it's the things that happen isolated, and the things that happen over and over. And the over and over ones are quite weird. Like the lady talks to her grandmother, and to her mother every day at 4, and the mother dies. She didn't even know the mother's died, and she's still talking every day at 4. And then they find out the person had died days before, and the mother kept calling for it. I think it was like 2 years, and finally had stopped. And a lot of times these calls stop when either they realize that they're not there, or when the caller, the person who's hearing the call realizes or learns that they're dead. The call stops. That's been a common occurrence. So anyhow, didn't mean to ramble about that, but the phantom messages, we try to look at all angles of it. It's a pretty there's a lot of different types, as you can imagine. It was kind of fun to put them all together, because of course we've seen the type of audio and phantom messages in all areas, the paranormal. So,
well, we were talking about the Randy and Geller and all before. Now, I noticed you have a chapter or a short story in there about Houdini. What was that in reference to?
It was, we had a chapter on celebrity phantom messages, and I always like to include some of Houdini's wisdom, because I thought he was very, I loved his spirit of how he went after it. Most people were just, most people were like Randy, that would just say, I loved Randy, but it was sad that he just couldn't, open himself up to anything. But anyhow, that's, hey, the world needs some of them too, as much as, he frustrated me at times, but, but I liked, like Houdini had a lot of these death contracts. He wanted to be able to try to communicate from beyond, and he wanted his loved ones that he was close to try too. So they all had codes of what they would say to prove it was them. So, if they went to a medium or something, then they know if they get the right message that it would be, his dear friend, or he had probably about a dozen people he had pacts with. So, I thought that was interesting. And the other thing that the other part was in the theories and discussion. If you're going to have anybody talk about, perception, or that as being one of the areas, and looking at it, nobody said it better than Houdini. So it wasn't a lot, but, wanted a little bit. But to me, when we were doing this book, just knowing about Houdini and the length that he went to, the length that he went to 30 years to try to find it. Unfortunately, he was around during spiritualism, so he got all the fakes going to him. You know what I mean? It was, I would have too bad somebody wasn't there to say, hey, Harry, let's go to this poltergeist, because he was a guy who he wanted to go, but of course, unfortunately, that's who you're going to attract if you're famous and, somebody wants to get in the limelight, they're going to go to him until he put them all out of business and they stop going to him. But I mean, that was unfortunate. If he was able to connect with, some of the cases out there that weren't the popular, that was what was going on in his time, unfortunately, that's what was huge in his time. So it was an unfortunate distraction because he was a guy who was open enough, and his spirit of trying to find it was very admirable and extensive.
I think one of the more fascinating cases, and I know that I've followed this one for quite some time, that you have in your book, was the Ken Webster and Deb Oakes case in England, which would probably be, I don't know, time slip, witchcraft. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is such a fascinating case, and that's why Jimmy and I wanted to say let's dig deep. Now we have computers. We can research some of this. Let's track down some people. Let's dig deeper because it's just a fascinating case. And I agree, like what you said. What is it? Well, there were some things that were poltergeist-like, but certainly not maybe not the classic, but yeah, I mean, time slip seemed to be the best definition. What else do you call it? But yeah, that's over 300 phantom messages. That certainly was the king of phantom. For the listeners, that's a case of one of the very, very early computers in the 80s had no capability to send messages or anything like we have today, with these strange Old English messages showing up. And to make a long story short, because some may know the story, but there's over 300 messages. They were communicating with this Thomas from 400 years ago. It appeared that they might have been communicating with someone from the future. Or it's tough when we say time because we don't know. They may not be in the future, maybe our past, whatever. But and Ken and Deb also said, I mean, they think that some of the communicators were messing with them, and not that it was a hoax, but just that they don't really know if this person is who they said they were. They really do believe though that it was Thomas, and those questions back and forth were answered lightning fast in very Old English, and that was quite remarkable. And it was done under test conditions, and Gary Rowe was kind enough to finally talk about this case and really say good about it, because he was there, and he did it under controlled conditions with his own computer and everything else. And the things that were happening there were remarkable. And definitely it's one of my favorite chapters for sure, because it's just such a fascinating case.
Well,
Jimmy, anything you want to add to that, or?
No, I know we didn't want to tell the whole long story, but this was back in 1984, when there was no internet, no instant messaging, no email, really, and they were getting instant messages back and forth from the present 1984 from 400 years ago on their computer. Thank you.
Well, and the person that was sending the messages said that, he said that he wasn't dead, that he was seeing, how did he describe it? Did he say it was like a light box or something like that, or
Yeah. He called the computer a light box, and they asked him how he got it, and he said it was like the wall opened up and the devil himself stepped out. He said, but it wasn't the devil. Meaning that, to him, he was shocked, and, he sees this thing walking out of the wall and stuff, and gave him the light box. And so it certainly sounds, from what I gather, I mean, my guess, of course, would be alien, but I mean, how accurate is that? I mean, alien, we know it's alien. We know it's something like not usual, but you know what I mean? To me, it sounds, and then there was a element of an experiment going on. But one of the most fascinating things is the predictions of predicting the next supernova. And of course, at the time, Ken and Deb were talking about it before, of course, they became disgusted because, they learned that, it's a tough thing when you go public like that. And, but it's such a weird case that you just know it's, you just know it's, I know it's legit because, Gary wrote and stuff, but I mean, it's so weird that if you were going to write like a fake book, you just wouldn't have put some of the stuff in it. And matter of fact, I don't know if you guys know, I know Ken had commented that made him mad, is that by telling the truth and everything that happened, some of it just sounded nuts. You know what I mean? But that's how it's, like Mark Twain said, truth is stranger than fiction, because, fiction, of course, that has to make sense. It's all got to make, fiction's bad when it just doesn't make sense. Whereas, we know the truth, the truth doesn't have to follow any rules. The paranormal just is, and, of
course, nowadays,
so anyhow,
Well, I was going to say, nowadays it would be a lot easier to, kind of fake it, with connected computers and everything like that. But as Jimmy pointed out, then, I mean, this was a computer that was borrowed from the BBC, and I mean, it was, not connected in any way. And I mean, probably back then it was like what? Probably had 50 megabytes of hard drive space.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It's, it reminds me of what they used to say about the cattle mutations. They'd say, it can't be a laser because the laser would have to be huge. But, today, guess what? Today we got lasers that aren't huge. You know what I mean? So it is kind of interesting, but yeah, we've come a long way with that for sure. But I mean, they did, even at the time, check to make sure there wasn't, 3 vans worth of equipment or something that would be able to somehow do it, or somebody would be able to, like his bandmate he thought was messing with him, but they didn't know how it was happening. And it was just too much. And of course it got much more bizarre with the aged photo going back and forth. And I was fascinated by the fact that Thomas, one of his very first questions that he wanted to know more than anything else was what the material was that was on the desk. And there was a plastic notebook. And that was like the burning question. What is that material? It doesn't look like wood. He doesn't know. He hasn't seen plastic like that. So to me, I'm reading that and I'm like, wow, this is fascinating, because it was such a fascinating conversation and messages throughout the entire ordeal, because, it just seemed so honestly like what somebody from that time, what they would ask, what they would notice, what they would want to know, you know what I mean? How they would react. Just everything was, it was fascinating.
Just the sheer fact that this guy was willing to have these conversations rather than screaming witch and running out the door, never to come back again.
Right, which his girlfriend basically did. But fascinating case. But there's there's you guys may have heard of that, but there's the Rosenheim poltergeist, South Shields poltergeist. I mean, they had some fascinating phantom messages. One of my favorite is The Office, where where they in London, where they had the clock that you can call to get the time. And, these phones were going berserk, and they replaced them. They tried everything. And I forget the amount of times, but it called for that number. I don't know if it was 100 times or something. And so the guy gets a bill for the whole, all these phone calls, and he had to complain. And they're like, well, the phone calls are made. He goes, it's physically impossible for me to dial the phone that way. So they ended up taking the calls off. But that, it is fascinating, and anytime, anywhere, they'll use your cell phone. They'll, it just all different methods, but they get through, whoever they may be, depending on, what kind of call it is or what kind of communication it is. So.
Well, that's just it. Poltergeists especially seem to love playing with the telephone. Whether it's like making these multiple phone calls to cases that that I've heard about, where say somebody would call a household that's being haunted by a poltergeist. Somebody will answer who will sound like the person who's living there. They'll have a conversation, but then later that person will say, "Well, I didn't talk to you on the phone. There wasn't anybody home." Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to have to interrupt this because we have to go to our top of the hour break. So when we come back, we'll continue with more phantom messages on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to the second hour of Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz, along with Timothy Green Beckley, and tonight...
Yeah, that's me.
Yay! And we're talking with Bill Hull and Jimmy. I keep wanting to call him Jiminy. I don't know why.
Call me Jiminy.
Jimmy Petzanito, or Mr. Haunted.
Just make the checks out to the proper spelling. That's all.
There you go. That's right. But Jimmy, I wanted to ask you, out of all the stories that you have in your and Bill's new book, Phantom Messages, do you have a favorite or a couple of favorites?
I have a favorite that Jiminy actually investigated.
Okay.
You want to hear a little about that?
Yes, definitely.
All right, this was a case we had investigated in 1995 or so, and I didn't realize till after we started writing the book. This fits right into our category. So this particular family was complaining that their cable box was talking to them, and when we went to their house to investigate the whole thing, and there was a husband, wife, and a 14-year-old son. And we asked what happened, and they said one Friday night they were watching Seinfeld rerun, and their cable box started flipping out, just going to random stations. It was back in the days when the cable box only went from 0 to 70, so it was racing back 0 to 70, back and forth. And they said something's wrong with the cable. We'll go to bed. So the next day, about the same time, the cable box started flipping out again. The 14-year-old boy has a cousin that lives in Florida that they visit frequently, and he committed suicide a couple weeks before. So the son suggested, he goes, maybe it's cousin whoever trying to communicate with us. So when it did that, it started flipping out real bad, the cable box. So I think it was the mother that said, let's say that channel 1 is in channel 1 doesn't even exist. I think it starts at 2, but like channel 1 is A and channel 26 is Z. So immediately the cable box went to channels 25, 5, and then 19, which we're using that code spelled yes. Right? So for the next hour or so, they were asking the TV questions. Imagine that. And then they would write down all the channels I went to and then decipher all the answers later. And I told them this big long story how this man was murdered in their they had I think it was a first floor apartment. The man was murdered in their apartment, and he was carried out in a real detailed messages. He was carried out in a carpet, rolled up in a carpet by 2 men. They gave us a social security number, the dead man's social security number. So the father is like, this might be an unsolved mystery, that this soul needs help. And he called the police department and told them the story. The police came to investigate. And they, after researching, the social security number never existed. The name that the cable box gave them, that man, he was not a missing person. It didn't match anybody that was missing or anything. So they weren't sure who they were talking to, and that went on for months. And what was interesting was, you could say somebody was playing around with the box, but the police witnessed the box doing this, and we have also pictures of the police reports in the book of what the police witnessed. I remember the cable box told the police officers child's names through the cable box, how old the phone number, the responding officer's home phone number. Then, like I said, this is before internet, pretty much. It's not like you're going to find everybody that quick anymore. What else about? Oh, and also the cable box would address you as your age. So that was like your name. So the father was 44 at the time. So anytime he walked into the room, the TV would switch to 44. And they understood that to mean hi. When he left the room, it would go to 44 3 times, and they understood that to be goodbye. So they used to have parties where the neighbors would come over, and they'd escort, them all into the room individually, and it would tell their age on the cable box. So after a while, somebody suggested, why don't you try to get a new cable box? So they called the cable company.
Why? Why? That's no fun.
It's a treasure. But yeah, so the cable technician came over and exchanged boxes, and they were asking questions, and nothing was happening. So they said, as the lady that installed the cable was leaving, she looked over her shoulder, and it flashed her age, and then she ran out of there. By the time we got there,
that would have made a great Twilight Zone story.
It really is a good story.
And
and it ends really
definitely.
weird too.
I mean the Twilight Zone definitely. Of course, their episodes, as you guys, I'm sure, could probably think of a few. D. Scott Rogo type of, phone calls from the dead and that kind of thing. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That does sound like it would make a great one. Hey, Jimmy, you can be in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Well,
he has already,
of course. Of course, one of our favorite topics on Exploring the Bizarre, broadcast every Thursday night on KCOR radio, and then transplanted up to YouTube on our exclusive channel, Mr. UFO Secret File, is the UFO phenomena. And I think this kind of ties in. There have been several UFO flaps around the United States and possibly the world where ham radio operators were able to pick up signals coming from. Well, Tim, didn't Tesla claim that he was picking up signals on his radio?
Oh yeah. Except you have to remember that Tesla picked these up in 1898, and as far as anybody knows, Tesla had the only radio receiver, and nobody else was transmitting radio as far as we know at that point in time.
There was a flap down in Lumberton, North Carolina, that Lee Spiegel investigated many years ago, where ham radio operators were sitting around at night and they would hear these broadcasts that supposedly coming, and it would repeat the same thing, like it was, on a loop, that it was a transmission from the spaceship, blah blah blah, hovering over, blah blah blah, and on and on and on. But not just picked up by one ham radio operator, but picked up by several of them, and even the astronauts, because I went through the transcripts of many years ago. They were even picking up mysterious signals of some kind in their headsets. I mean, so the UFOs have been plagued in a sense by strange transmissions. Well, you have one in the book, I know, about the case of in England where the TV was taken over.
Yes, yeah, that's a fascinating one. The TV and it was a TV and a computer. So, and that was really that was a bizarre one. With the it was the basic mess. You always wonder when you hear the messages.
Ishtar command, kind of message. Yeah,
the messages are always, everybody be nice to each other, kind of thing. But it was a remarkable case by.
Then they shoot you with their ray gun.
Yeah, but for whoever it is, whether it was just that person themselves, in a time slip or something, certainly a fascinating case. But like you said, with UFOs, there's the insect sounds, the calls being interrupted, and the same kind of thing you get in the hauntings, where you'll hear the quote unquote spirit or entity on the phone or take over part of the phone, and you see the same thing in the UFO area with the taking over the phone. So we do see that commonality across all the different kinds of phantom messages. And of course, John Keel is.
I was just going to mention that. Well, there you go. Yeah. I mean, he had some phenomenal. Well, that all started down there in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, with the arrival of Mothman. Well, you tell the story about how we would receive these telephone calls at his motel where he was staying, and nobody even knew he was there.
Oh yeah, and when they had a whole bunch of while you were out slips, basically waiting for him at a hotel, that he just suddenly decided, I'll stop now. And they're like, oh, we got a bunch of messages for you, Mr. Keel. He's like, what are you talking about? I didn't even know I was going to stay here. They were all like gibberish, which of course is also not uncommon for these bizarre occurrences. But yeah, we did include some of the classics because you just have to, and of course John Keel's some of his phantom messages certainly were.
Indrid Cold, right? Indrid Cold calling him on the phone, I guess.
Yeah, just really amazing, and so the extraterrestrial thing, and you guys talked about signals. We also have a case in there where we interviewed the scientists, and it's the most it's an anomaly that can't be explained, and in solar-like stars. So in other words, they did there's a hypothesis that's been out there that if we receive a signal or whatever, we receive something, these are the kinds of things we would look for as far as anomalies, whatever. So that exists, and this wavelength, this experiment that these guys did, they got such a signal that matched that format, and so we're interviewing one of the scientists on the paper, and of course, and they don't dance around it. They say in their scientific paper that, the extraterrestrial hypothesis is definitely, that's in play here. They mentioned one other thing that it could be, but like the guy told Jimmy and I, we have to allow for other stuff. But he said, I'm telling you, it really, to me, if I had to say what it was, it would be, this is it. This is some sort of signal, and so the entire paper is, of course, put in English, thanks to these wonderful scientists, and then we also reproduce the actual scientific study. But it's the newest and I think most exciting thing. Of course, the thing that is always disappointing is, now what? Now how do you validate it? And how, so it's like everything else. That this is something really cool and really different, but now how do we find out exactly what it is? But and of course that's what these guys are trying to do. And we asked that question, well, how do you find out? And they laid out their plans, and of course we hope that they continue with that important research. But it's difficult, because if it is a real signal from out somewhere, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to repeat itself or in the same way, and they're aware of all this. So that's interesting, even though we know that extraterrestrials don't necessarily have to come from, another planet or out there, obviously, I don't have to tell you guys, theories, whether it's dimension or portal or whatever, but we thought that was interesting because it was it definitely was an unexplainable contact, even to the scientific community. And, I'm sure some think, oh, it's something else, or what. Yeah, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with guessing that it's something else and it's not anything big or whatever. But, obviously you can't do good science by just, you can't guess it. You've got to find out, so I'm glad that these guys, are dedicated to it. And it was cool, interviewing them and kind of hearing I don't want to say off the record, but there's certain things in certain ways you have to put it in the paper, and it was cool talking to them and saying, yeah, we put it could be that, but he said, we don't think so. You know what I mean? So
it makes me wonder, though, if they do get another signal, or maybe several signals, whether or not it could end up being spurious, kind of like the cable box, which was almost acting like a Ouija board, given all of this wonderful information, Social Security, this long drawn out story, murdered people and things like that. All of it turns out to be false. I wonder if the same kind of scenario could present itself with some of these, like SETI messages, if they ever do start to come through. Because how are you going to really, if it's coming allegedly from another planet light years away, how are you going to confirm that? You're going to send a rocket ship up there, and 100 years from now, They radio back. Yeah, sorry, no one here.
Yeah, I mean, we do have in the book, and there are ways that they could do it, but to get at the ultimate answer, you could do certain things to say, okay, this clearly is an anomaly, and it clearly isn't this and that and that. But at the end of the day, if you don't have an alien body, or like Neil deGrasse Tyson said, next time you're abducted, grab an ashtray. So we got something really cool to look at, because anything that you steal from the spaceship's going to be really cool. But that's the ultimate thing is, it's of course always fascinating, but how do you? It could be so promising. And it's just like the thing with Mars, right? There's water on Mars. No, there's not. And my only astrophysicist friend, and I always say astrophysicist friend because it makes me sound smarter because I know him. He's just a nice guy and likes to hang out with dumb people. No, but like he said, well, the reason it's difficult is because if it's under the surface that way, and then it's gone, and they can't capture it, and blah blah blah. And he's explaining all this stuff to me. And I'm like, oh, I get it. So But if you're out there just trying to follow this stuff, you're like, it's there. No, there's not water. No, there is water. So the answer is most likely yes, probably, or just about guaranteed. But this is the problem, and but it's funny. We try, but
well, and there
I don't know
was
how I got on that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting though because when you bring up Mars, because gosh, when was that? I think it was in the 1920s when Mars made a close orbital approach to Earth. A scientist had all the radio stations shut themselves down for a few minutes to see if they could pick up any radio signals from Mars, and they actually, if I'm remembering this correctly, they actually did receive something in the form of almost like coding that when it was printed out, it looked like it was making a human figure, in shape. But again, as far as as far as we know, there's nobody on Mars sending radio signals. So
Right.
unless somebody had a really powerful transmitter that was
Right.
just for the hell of it, broadcasting this just to fool everybody. Where did that come from?
Right. Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff, and I'm sure the astronauts know more. And of course, some of them have talked a bit, but it's fascinating. Lot to learn, right? We've learned a lot, and of course, every time we learn something, there's more questions. But I guess that makes it fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's okay. It's it now, and that's the point. I mean, we talk about these phantom messages, and some of these as Tim Beckley was pointing out, especially during UFO flaps, a lot of times ham operators, when people had CB radios, or even just your regular radios would pick up mysterious signals, but a lot of times there doesn't seem to be a lot of difference from what my research that I have conducted between the so-called supernatural paranormal messages and these alleged extraterrestrial communications. They all seem almost to be coming from the same sources.
Yeah. My expression is that I don't know if they know each other, but they seem to ride the same bus. Whether it's a UFO or Bigfoot, whatever you're talking about, it does seem like that, and or from the same places. Could be a billion of them, but you get the point. Same modality. Ooh, there's another. See, Jimmy, proud. I didn't even look that up. It just popped into my head as one of the 4 words I remembered. No.
Nonetheless.
Nonetheless, yeah. But definitely we see those, and that's why we wanted to do phantom messages and take a broad view, because we saw just a lot of those similarities in different indicators, different things that happen. The knowledge of when the calls end, when you figure something out, and just all those different little characteristics. Some are a little bit different, depending on what kind of message it is or what's happening. But there's a lot of similarity across all types of phantom messages, whether it's by phone, text, magnetic doodle board, as one of the poltergeist cases had. Or cable box, or whatever it happens to be. And of course, there was a lot of stories that didn't make it because there were not multiple indicators. If somebody hears a song in a speaker and it has no meaning to anyone at all, that's more likely what used to happen to my speaker when it was disconnected in my room. The old speakers used to do that. Not all the time, but occasionally. But if you hear voices and it is of somebody and they were dead, and there's, if there's multiple characteristics, well, now we've got something really creepy and different. And, so we tried to really look for the cases that were much more unexplainable than just saying, it was just a cell phone glitch or something. Certain things.
All right.
Just
Well, I'm going to have to interrupt you here
like
because
that,
I'm going to have to interrupt you because it's time for our bottom of the hour break, and we'll be back for more Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Well, Tim, here we are at the final segment of the program. It just always seems that time goes by so fast when we have just really interesting guests and just a fascinating subject. So, Bill, Jimmy, I wanted to ask you. So now, everybody out there is familiar with EVPs, electronic voice phenomena. What's the difference between something like that and with a majority of the stories that you have in your new book, Phantom Messages?
Well,
go ahead, Jimmy.
well, no, I'm saying some EVPs that you're usually trying to get them on purpose. You're investigating or you're recording. Our messages are mostly unexpected messages that you didn't you're not trying to get. Well, we included a couple of pieces that were really interesting, like Bill, the bass guitar thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
There's one story where well, actually, your question was how do they differ from EVPs? Yeah, they're mostly unexpected, where EVPs are usually expected, or you want EVPs.
And unexpected and direct. So there's no intermediary. There's no medium. There's no EVP.
Yeah,
there's no photograph. There's
not that we disagree, but it's like we didn't want a medium or psychic to say I felt this message, and we wanted direct communication. But this one, what was it? A woman, Bill, that her son died, who was only like maybe 18, 19 years old, and he was learning how to play bass guitar. And they kind of packed up his room, and they had his bass guitar and his amplifier against the wall. And this is where, as you mentioned EVPs, they said let's because they heard a lot of noise near his room a lot. They heard noises and voices, so they said let's put a tape recorder up by his room and leave the house for a while. And they left, and then when they played the tape back, they heard what was his favorite song? He was learning how to play the beginning to
Crazy Train.
Yeah, by Ozzy Osbourne.
Mm-hmm,
So he was learning that song, and I guess he was new. And on the recording, they could hear the bass when they played it back. It was kind of a cool story.
And it was him playing the bass. It wasn't like Crazy Train the song. It was him playing the bass.
Just the bass only. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's an example of when somebody went to record something, but most of them are very unexpected. Some are even on answering machines. But
picture frames
and in a lot of cases,
we have a picture frame,
magnetic doodle board. I mean, yeah.
Okay, now how do you get a message on a picture frame?
Well.
Jimmy set you up for that one.
Yeah.
Well, a woman named Joanne. It was her birthday, and she was feeling sad because her mom passed away about 10 years ago, and she thinks about her on her birthday, and she misses her on her birthday or holidays, whatever. And there's a picture frame that she has hanging, I think, in the bathroom, where you could make any pre-recorded message you want. There's a little button you press, and you can make a recording. And it was a gift from her husband and children, and she kept a photo of her 3 children in the frame. And when you press the button, it says, "Happy Mother's Day, Mom, we love you." and it will keep that message until you change it. So that one of her birthdays, whatever, the poor thing was scrubbing the bathroom floor on her birthday, and she heard audio come from the nearby picture frame that said "Happy Birthday," and it was a woman's voice that she believes sounded like her mother. That said, was it "Happy Birthday" to her mom? To her, I'm sorry, her mom. She believed her mom said "Happy Birthday" to her from the picture frame, when it's supposed to say "Happy Mother's Day, Mom" from her kids, and it only happened once. And that was a picture frame. A lot of different stories we got in there.
That's a good one.
Bill.
Yeah.
Now tell us about the book.
and-
You've been talking about this book for months. And when's it
That's
coming
right.
out finally?
Oh, actually, it's out September 1st, and they could even get the autographed signed copies from Jimmy and I off our website, halloftheparanormal.com. And you get extra surprises in there that would last for generations and generations within your family. With as long as you take care of them well. Yeah, proper care. Yeah. And now he's like, well, I don't know what these guys are talking about. I don't know.
And the title of the book is Phantom Messages, Chilling Phone Calls, Letters, Emails, and Text from Unknown Realms. And I mean, when I got this book, I mean, it's like you said at the beginning of the show, it reminded me very much of D. Scott Rogo's early book. I think, who did he write it with? Was it Raymond Bayless? Phone Calls from the Dead. Yeah. But this is, I mean, updated with all kinds of different. It seems like any kind of electronic that has the ability to leave a message, talk or whatever, seems to have been used by whatever is going on with this. I'm not, it's like you said, I'm not going to go say, they're all from those who have passed on. But like you said,
whether it's a stick against metal or whether it's Morse code or whatever it happens to be. But you're right, and that's what we were trying to show too. Is that it doesn't matter whether it was a dial phone. Doesn't matter whether it was even before that. It doesn't matter whether if it was a cell phone or a dumb phone or a smartphone or a letter. It doesn't matter. The messages come through even on an old 80s computer or TVs, searching the internet. The story where the internet and turning computers on, and as you guys as you said it, whether it's turning toys on and off, all sorts of electronics. We just think it's just so creepy and cool when there's messages involved. And some are heartwarming, and Jimmy refers to those stories as, go ahead, Jim.
Chicken soup for the paranormal soul stories.
But it's weird because even in the family help warnings and saying hello, even in that whole section, there's a lot of creepy stories in there too. But then there are some heartwarming ones, and then there are some that are just that chilling is the only word I can describe. Like, and again, it kind of brings me back to the time slip ones, like a guy who's hearing these sounds. He gets a call and he's hearing these, like a sound of disaster and metal crunching and people falling, and he's filled with dread and horror, and he instantly knows this is something really, really horrifying. And he's getting this call every day, and finally 9/11 comes. He gets one last call. The towers come down. He doesn't get any more calls. And and there's more to the story and stuff, but I mean, it's those kind of calls, like to hear yourself die on the phone, all those kind of time slip weird things. Those are pretty. I mean they're all creepy, but I mean those are really creepy.
Bill, we have a cool story.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good, Jimmy.
Bill, tell us a story about Sir Paul McCartney. That's an interesting one. I didn't know that. Bill, you found that one.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, when the Beatles got back together, the three of them that were left to do "Free as a Bird," there were all sorts of recording electronic problems, and they even got John's voice on there, and then I think there was a song. There was a song on there that played, and it was just all the kind of antics that John would do, and even the song and everything. So yeah, they explained that they had no doubt that John was there, and as Paul said, after some of that happened, Paul said, John likes it. John likes it. So I thought that was really cool. So we had to include a Paul McCartney Phantom message.
Well,
how could you go wrong with that?
Well, yeah,
celebrity chapters.
And the and when they were trying, they said they were trying to put one of those backwards recordings on the end of the single, like one of their little and when what happens? And they recorded it back, the backwards message, but it came out with a bunch of the gibberish, and then John Lennon, the words John Lennon in it, and more gibberish.
Yeah, the voices. Yeah, the voice of John Lennon.
And they're claiming they didn't do that.
That they were just saying.
Yeah, no.
They were just saying random words, and then they backward masked it, and the words John Lennon came out.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, they did. Paul was not one to. He wouldn't have said that just to make it up. I think it makes him sound crazier, if anything. So, not to me, but So, and when you're that famous and stuff, he's got no reason to make it up. But all of them said that, Ringo and George, they all had talked about it. And, but I thought it was cool when, Paul said, yeah, John likes it, So,
well, I've got a story for you that I don't know if you may have run across this one. I don't know really if anybody knows this one, but in Indianapolis when I was working there, sometime I guess this would have been in probably the middle to early 1990s. There was a plane crash where a fighter jet. The pilot had to eject himself, and the jet ended up then crashing into a hotel near the airport. And one mother was on the news that night. They were still trying to find her son, and she said that he was still alive because shortly after the crash, he had called her up and said that he was okay. He was still in the hotel when the plane had crashed. He had jumped behind the checkout desk there in the main lobby. It was where he worked, and that he was waiting then for them, to come and get him. So when the fire department went to try to find him, they found him, but he was dead and had been dead almost immediately because the plane had crashed almost dead into the lobby. So I remember that when they interviewed that mother, I turned to my wife and I said, "He's dead." I said, "I don't know who called her, but he's dead." And then, sure enough, later on, confirmed that. And of course, my wife is just like, "Why do you tell me stuff like that? That just creeps me out."
Right. Yeah. There's that is a common kind of phantom message case. Ida Lupino was in a Twilight Zone episode and in the Celebrity Chapter. She had a similar case where, as a child, she was relaying messages from, the uncle calling and the grandmother saying, "Geez, it sounds like, he's sick or something." And they end up, finally, the mother gets home because of the whole actress family and everything. The mother gets home. They're like, you better call him because, he keeps calling. And, so not only did a little girl talk to him, Ida, when she was little, but also the grandmother did too. And the mother's like, oh my God, no, he couldn't have been calling. I found he committed suicide like 3 days ago or 4 days ago. So those kinds of things, and even voicemail messages when, when they're timed and everything else, are like, okay, well, everybody says, well, okay, maybe the message was delayed or something. Yeah, but not when they repeatedly call and you get it on voicemail, and it's not like he was alive yesterday, dead today. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes quite stranger, especially the cases of repeated. But the plane story made me think of a train story, a famous metro crash, and with Charles Peck. It was probably one of the most public phantom message cases a few years back, and it was nobody can figure it out. The cell carrier, everybody was contacted, try to figure it out because people are trying to get the story, but nobody had anything useful to say. But this guy died instantly when the train crashed. But they thought, the family thought, perhaps he was still alive because his phone was making calls throughout the night, every hour, and was calling all the people closest to him, his fiance, his mother, all his close loved ones. And they did end up locating the phone in the first car. And they never found the phone. They located his body in the first car. The doctors on the scene said that no, he didn't make any of these calls. He died instantly. He wouldn't have even lasted a minute. You know what I mean? It was just, he was in the very first car. He was gone. Jolted on it, dead on impact. And but that phone made those calls. It did not call the hairdresser. Did not call his mechanic. Did not. You know what I mean? Only made. It was about 35 phone calls in all. When they answered, it was just static. When they tried to call back, it went right to his voicemail. But those 35 calls went throughout the night, and then they stopped. And that's what, to me, that's the most bizarre thing. It's bizarre enough that a phone made those calls, but me not knowing technology, I can say, well, maybe it's a technology thing. But now you say, okay, well, who did it call? Mm-hmm. Now it gets weird, right? Because, if you've got all these phone numbers on your phone, how come it missed every other, call and number except for all the people in your family, and why would it be spaced out over hours and hours? You know what I mean? It's not like all these calls happen one after another. If there happen a few an hour throughout the night and everything, then that becomes really weird. But Verizon and the media and nobody could explain it. Sometimes you hear we think it was just this, or we think it might have been this, but that's of course a guess, and there were other cases involving regular phone lines and things like that. You always get, well, we think it was this, or it might have been this, but they still can't understand how it could have been that. They just say, it might have been. It's like saying, swamp gas. It's like, I don't know what to say. Maybe it was that. I don't know. But it's, it's like when they have to give an answer because we're an electronic giant. We got to say something. What are we going to tell them? Tell them. I don't know. It could have been a cross line or something. They just, it's okay to guess, or like we said, it's okay to have a hypothesis, but that's all it is. That's not an answer when you just say it could be. So they never really figured out, just like in any of these, how these things work, and it's. In our cases, in the book, I think it was about a little over 70% of them had witnesses and other people involved. But even the ones that are just single people, we picked out the ones where, we really felt that they were telling a story that didn't appear to even be, hallucination or something. Because when it's like me, if I have an experience in a place I'm investigating, I have to check myself and say, okay, is this me? Is it is there an electrical problem in here that's causing? Is there EMF problem here that's causing me to act weird or whatever? Or am I really feeling something paranoid, paranormal? Or am I just excited to be here and am trying to feel something and think I am, but not sure? When you're alone, sometimes it's you double check yourself even when you're think you're feeling something. When you have multiple people, then it becomes easier to confirm. But with some of these cases, the stuff that happened, and just hearing the people explain it, you just know it was something more it wasn't. And any of the usual kind of explanations,
Well, and that's the thing, though, is that you hear these stories, you talk to these people, and the stories are all so similar. And unless everybody that you have talked to,
right,
has read all these books and are very familiar, with these, seemingly paranormal types of messages, and they all got together and said, "Yeah, let's tell the same story." But that's the thing. Everybody the stories are just so similar.
Yeah, so a lot of these people had no interest in, the paranormal, and some of them say, I don't know what it was. Like the man who heard the phone calls, up until 9/11, he still doesn't know if it has anything to do with that. All he knows is the other people heard it, and it was recorded, and they had it on messages, and there were other people who listened to it and had to stop it. And he didn't, when he played it to other, his friend and other people he confided with, when he played, an example of these calls that were coming in, and of course, they're usually coming from unidentified numbers. That's, of course, with phantom messages, that's pretty normal. But, and he didn't tell them, here, listen to this, this is a disaster or whatever. But some of the people, they would just hear it for a second or two and a few seconds, and it was, you have to turn it off. They just, and which makes sense, because everybody, some people I'm sure are more sensitive to that stuff than others, but it was, it reminds me of, The Ring, the horror movie, where you see something, you see a tape or you see something like that, and you just know something's wrong, and, so those, to me, when they play the message for somebody else, and you see those people, and they're just like, no, and some just can't listen to it. Nobody wanted to listen to it. It was just that feeling of horror and dread. And that's not, hey, if I get a call and I heard metal, and even if I heard screams or whatever, I'd be on the phone like, hello, you know what I mean? It wouldn't be impacting me, really. It wouldn't be. So if somebody picks up the phone and then reacts that way, it's like, that's weird. It's in these cases, they almost instantly realize that, they're hearing something like very real, that this is not, it's almost like somehow they, I guess you'd call it intuition, or, it's just that primal, obvious that this is wrong. Like hearing, if I pick up the phone and hear some guy in a respirator, again, I'll be hello, won't be a big deal. But when you pick up the phone, you hear that, and you instantly know it's yourself. How do you instantly know that? I mean, now we're getting to, something that's way out there. So that to me is fascinating when they.
All right, Bill, I'm gonna have to interrupt you here because we are at the end of the program. So the book is Phantom Messages, and it comes out on September 1st. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yep, and you can get signed copies at halloftheparanormal.com. We'd be happy to sign it for you. We even sign Tim's name on it because we're used to forging his name. And,
all right.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you all. Thanks for listening. Good night.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on exploring the bizarre, and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the bizarre.